It's a great vibe of a space. And for pole vault, when you do a street vault like that, you have DJ music going on. You've got people clapping as the runner's going down the runway and then watching them vault a story and a half, 2 stories above your head. It's just kind of something that not a lot of people can do. So you really end up idolizing the talents that they have and just are astonished at what they can do. So it was just different and unique and something that we were able to bring that people don't typically see here.
Hello and welcome to the Event Promoter Podcast. In this episode, we're talking to Lindsay Toussant Brown, who is the Executive Director and President of the Omaha Sports Commission. She has a long history of making sporting events exciting. She was a track athlete in college and got into the event industry, the sports industry, kind of by chance, and talks a lot about how she made that transition from being an athlete to actually putting on events and getting a degree in sports management. Now she has been involved with many of the track and field events that Omaha has brought, including the swim trials. She's gotten to put on some really cool events. Some of the ones that she threw out were doing a shot put on the Capitol lawn in Sacramento in California and doing the pole vault in the Capitol District in Omaha, which is this enclosed area with restaurants and a hotel, and it's a really cool plaza area, really interesting, unique places to host these types of events to get a larger crowd of people interested and make it a unique experience for the athletes that are participating. Lindsay has a wealth of knowledge in this space, and it was really cool to hear her story and how she got to where she is today. So if you're interested in sports events, this is one you're going to want to listen to. Event Vesta is a simple yet powerful tool for event organizers. With Event Vesta, you can post your upcoming events to event calendars all through your city on the most popular websites without spending hours on each doing it manually. Get hours worth of marketing done for your events in 5 minutes or less with Event Vesta. Check out how Event Vesta can help your business today by checking out vesta.fun/podcast. Well, welcome, Lindsay, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here, and you have Omaha Sports Commission has an interesting history, and I'm also just interested to hear your own background as an event organizer, promoter, securer. There's a lot that goes into what you're currently doing. So at the high level, I'd love to give you the opportunity to, on one front, explain what Omaha Sports Commission is and does, and then also what your role is there. Yeah.
So thanks for having me. First off, Sports Commission I am executive director at the Omaha Sports Commission. We are a nonprofit organization that really revolves around the tourism side of sports specific events. So our job is to create an economic impact within our metropolitan community, because we do work metro wide. And how do we create events? How do we drive events here to bring visitors to our community and see the great things that the Omaha metropolitan area has to offer to both participants who are, competing in these events, but also spectators and visitors who may have never come here before.
So what are some of the sporting events that the Omaha Sports Commission has worked on bringing in Omaha?
So Sports Commission started in about 2003. First event really kicked off with what everybody is quite familiar with, the Olympic swim trials. So that started in 2008. We hosted for 4 different years. And for that, that kind of made our name for ourselves. But we have expanded into a lot of other sports, whether it's a speed skating, there was a figure skating championships, triathlon, age group, nationals, working a lot with NGB, so the national governing bodies. So that may be your USA components, right? Part of the Olympic movement. We also get to create our own events. So the pole vault event that happens down in the Capitol District. We started cross country out at Mahoney. We take over the Omaha Sports Commission Awards show, because apart from being able to and actually bringing events in the community, we strive to find some way to impact our community and continue to drive the organizations, the clubs, the individuals who are already here to that next level. So that's kind of what the Sports Commission Awards show does, also called the Oscars, because we are recognizing the talent that has come from here or currently exists here, from coaches, trainers, athletes, all of that good stuff within our sport industry. So we have a different couple components that we luckily get to dip into.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, and that's a big impact, I think, that I was reading the economic impact report, which as someone that comes from nonprofits, I geek out about some of that stuff, but,
Yeah. It's
and
important, right? I mean, that
yes,
really
yeah.
fulfills what we do and the community's needs as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how did you get into, you weren't always executive director. You, started as director of events,
That is
and
correct.
then you did operations. Tell me a little bit about what your background is. How did you get to this role, and what did that look like?
Kind of what a lot of the population does is we go to school, we go to college, we get a degree, and then we don't particularly use that degree. I followed that same path where I actually have a bachelor's degree in speech language pathology, but
Hmm.
I was an athlete in college and ended up kind of staying a fifth year to continue some things with my degree, but I had some eligibility left over, as again, many athletes do. I ended up not using the eligibility, but I started kind of helping the athletic department organize a few different sporting events. And that really started to kind of spur this, how do you work in sports? How do you get into
Hmm.
this? What does that mean? A few different people at the university that I was at looked at me and were like, "You're in the wrong field." And I go, "I don't know what that means." And they said, "You need to work in sports." And I was like, "I don't know what that means."
Yeah.
Because that wasn't, a major at my school. It wasn't something that I knew of people going into. So ultimately I ended up doing a 180 and going to grad school for sports management. I had a quick accelerated program, and then the rest is kind of history. After that, you get your first job into sports, and then sports is a tight community like many other industries. So moving around is quite easy. Before being in Omaha, I was in Indianapolis where I was working at USA Track and Field. So, those national governing bodies work a lot with sports commissions. So I knew of sports commissions. I was pretty familiar with the work that they do, but also I loved the variety of events that they got to work with, right? I've listed off a bunch of things between swimming, curling, there's
Yeah.
wrestling, there's pickleball, there's badminton, there's judo, there's all these types of sports that you can work with. And instead of just working in the running world, which is still a passion of mine, absolutely. But now I can work on a larger scale. So ended up taking a job here in Omaha as director of events back in 2017 and just slowly made my way up, I guess, and took over as executive director about a year ago now.
What did director of events look like? What were you working on in that role?
Yep. So just specifically targeting whether it was bringing the event in or organizing the event that, we were putting on it and have. And I still do a little bit of that because we are a very small and mighty team of two. But taking on executive director role has a little bit more functionalities to that, from more of an operations, management side of making an organization successful in the way that it should be.
Yeah. Why do you feel personally that events like sporting events, and just events in general are important to communities?
I think events fuel the economic development and economic impact. You and I have chatted a little bit to get to know each other, and we're both kind of in the same boat where we are transplants, and when I came here for my in-person interview, I had never been to Omaha before, didn't know anything about Omaha. I knew it sat in the state of Nebraska. Beyond that, that was about all I was aware of. And it was really important for me to know the events that were taking place within the area when I came on that visit, because that was really going to be a deciding factor on whether I would relocate here or not. Because healthy sports and outside of sports, your arts, your cultural scene, all of that directly correlates with the growth that we have and the revitalization that you see in the different neighborhoods and areas of the metropolitan area. So kind of seeing what was occurring at that time, talking to a few different people who lived here of what was going on and what festivals happen, what sporting events go on. I got to see some of that growth that I was really, really looking for. And honestly, the events of those natures really keep our community thriving for betterment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, I when I visited before I moved here, I went and saw some music shows, and I'm like really into the music space. So like just seeing that there was a lot of live music happening, definitely, even just like at a glance, just being like, oh, there's stuff happening, here. And like I can go meet people. That's a big factor as well. If you're just new to a city, like how are you going to meet people? Or if you want to meet new people, like events allow people to do that.
Yep. And knowing, you'd kind of mentioned this earlier, but knowing how the growth is happening here, if you're a transplant and you don't know anybody here, you have to find all that out for yourself. And the best way to know is, talk to people, meet people. Hopefully you're an extrovert, right? If you moved here on a limb by yourself, you're probably an extrovert unless you really, really wanted the job. But, for us, it's you start to see, especially if you've moved around a little bit, you start to know the factors that directly correlate to how is the community growing and how can I be a part of it?
Yeah, definitely. Is there a favorite event that you've gotten to work on at all?
Event.
You've done a lot. So
I know. And I'll talk a little bit about maybe pre-Omaha and Omaha, just because so that way people can kind of understand some of the stuff of, where I came from, but also why Omaha is kind of super important, right? Yeah. So pre-Omaha, favorite event, there's two specific things that really jump to mind. My last job in Indianapolis, I got to take Team USA, who was racing in a cross-country meet, over to Scotland. So that was kind of like a dream, right? You got to travel internationally. You got to represent, be part of, the Team USA staffing group who took, these runners who were competing for that Team USA title or country title, representing Team USA. So that one was great. Unique-wise, I had an event in Sacramento, and it was part of track and field as well. It was an outdoor nationals, and at a track meet, everything happens within the confinements of the track typically. Well, we ended up taking a different path for shot put and put the shot put competition on the state capitol front lawn. It was just different, right? It was just unique. So that one is a really memorable one for me. And then when you talk about Omaha specifically, I would say the very first time we did the Capital District pole vault event, because for us, it was different, right? It was new. It was unique. We got to exercise an event within the Capital District area that had never been done before. And that event has like a different vibe for the track community, because a lot of times there's so much going on and you're focused on one event, but you're trying to cheer on a bunch of others, and you don't typically have like a party DJ music, loud cheering vibe going on, right? So for us, that event really, really capitalized on that because it was just different.
Yeah. Can you explain a little bit of what made that different or makes that different?
So that spacing was felt like it was built for pole vault, right? We could fit a pole vault runway in there with just enough space to be able to host not only local competitors, but professional, because they'll use different lengths in their runway and their approach to actually vaulting. So for us, it was really a perfect fit. And because of the way that space is built, it's super intimate when you have an event in there, right? Because you're kind of enclosed. It's a great vibe of a space. And for pole vault, when you do a street vault like that, you have DJ music, going on. You've got just people clapping as the runner's going down the runway, and then watching them vault a story and a half, 2 stories above your head. It's just kind of something that not a lot of people can do. So you really end up idolizing the talents that they have and just are astonished at what they can do. So it was just different and unique, and something that we were able to bring that people don't typically see here.
Yeah. I honestly didn't even know about that. So,
it happens every July, so
nice.
It's a free event. That's the other thing, is that this is a kind of a community event. It's a free event. We have the opportunity for local vaulters to participate in it, and then we do bring in some professional athletes as well, because their talent is just out of this world.
Yeah, that would be really cool to see. It sounds like I love that when events can take something that you expect to be in one setting and change the setting because it really makes it unique.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes events memorable is how unique they are. Because it's like you could see the same competition, you can see the same music show, see the same artist, whatever, over and over and over again, but you put them in like a different location or like mix things up, and it's like, oh wow,
different.
that's
yeah.
And people will talk about it forever because they're like, remember that time I went to see that pole vaulting event in the Capital District?
Yeah. So just, how do we make it different? How do we make it memorable? And how do we make it fun for both participants and spectators?
Yeah, that's amazing. So I don't know how much, it'll be interesting to hear what your perspective is on this. I always ask everyone, what do you think is harder, organizing or promoting events? Just interested in what your answer to that is.
So my answer is that each of them have their own challenges. Yeah. So when you talk about organizing events, it's complicated because of the diversity that events carry with it, right? So it's different constituents, it's different rules, it's varying facilities, and or competition playing fields. So that in itself makes it very complicated because no two are ever alike. Promoting events, that changes with what event you're marketing, right? So for us, it's important how the community accepts those sports that we're bringing in, and how the sports that we're servicing locally absorbs what we're bringing in. So for me, marketing, it's not the standard newsletter and word of mouth that it was, decades ago. At this point now, there's newsletters, there's word of mouth, there's clubs and membership, there's print and digital, social media advertising. And beyond that, we're so saturated with ads anymore that individuals could just consume their ads so differently and the marketing so differently that now you have to target and geo-target. It's not just social media and your little ads that pop up on your webpage. You now have to target who you're advertising to because there's so much advertising that people take in. So that also comes with its own challenges. I would say that I am not my specialty is not marketing. It is more event side of things, but I think they each have their own challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to hear now multiple people answer that question, and it a lot of it depends on how complex the events they are that they're organizing. So like obviously the types of events that Omaha Sports Commission is working on or that you've worked on in the past are a little bit more complex than some other events might be. So the organizing side is challenging, and there is kind of a built-in fan base for some sports that you're able to tap into, but I'm sure that becomes challenging whenever the sport is a little more niche. And maybe doesn't have like as big of a local following to try to find those people that are interested or could be interested in that sport. Yeah.
And so then you may have to expand into more of like a regional side of things. But if you look hard enough, you might find it locally, and or how do you help start it locally? So there becomes its own challenge, a separate challenge as well.
Yeah. Can you touch on that? Is there any experience you've had where you've been bringing something to the city, or you've been working on projects that's bringing something to the city that maybe one of those sports that is doesn't have a huge, at least obvious following in Omaha yet, that, or the region that you were trying to build that up or kickstart that? Yeah,
I would say one thing in particular, we're currently working on it. We were just awarded an event to happen in 2024. And it's called USA. It's part of USA Boccia, and that is a Paralympic sport that only exists in Paralympics, and it would be a mix of bocce ball mixed with a little bit of curling for the point system, and that doesn't have a club here. There are clubs regionally around us, like in the Midwest, right? Whether it's, Minneapolis area or Kansas City, but that doesn't mean that one can't start here, because beyond it being for those in the Paralympic world, different rehab centers can use it as part of the therapy to rehabilitate somebody for whatever may have happened to them, right? So there's different components to it, where you could just play it for fun. It doesn't have to be super competitive, which is the great part about this particular sport is that anybody can really enjoy it, and it has its own uniqueness to it. But so that one will be a challenge for us over the next year and a half, is because there's a lot of education behind it, right? So beyond educating people what this is, because it only exists in the Paralympic world, therefore there might be a good chunk of the population locally that doesn't know that this sport exists. Then how do we start integrating it into schools and rehab facilities? And then how do we get people to come and just enjoy it and cheer on these athletes because they are part of the Paralympic movement? And it's such a great success story. So I will say we've got a challenge ahead of us with that one, but that's a great example of it.
Yeah. What I find interesting about the sports world, maybe that's different than some other kind of like entertainment and events spaces, is how far forward you're looking. You know, I was talking to someone that is with the Seattle Sounders, and they were talking about the 2026 World Cup, whenever that's going to be. And they're already seeding events and going out into the community, trying to like build up this groundswell of interest, because they're going to be a host city for the World Cup, so that when it comes, there's like a huge even more of a following for soccer, football than there currently is, so that they can fill that capacity for that and be ready kind of with the relationships and stuff in the community for that.
Yeah. Some of these events, depending on what they are, what level they are, I mean, they are years out. You know, I bet that World Cup bid has been worked on for time, you know, and finally being able to host it, I think it's next year, 2024. So, I mean, but for them, they've probably been working on it for 5-6 years at this point. But it really depends on, you know, every event is very different, and every event ownership group operates very differently. And even sometimes, you know, those groups who try to bid out their events 2-3 years in advance, certain things get awarded quicker than others. So, you know, if you're on that side of the table, you may be trying to award events out for 2025, but yet you've got this one single event that still needs a home for 2023. So when you're on that side, you're playing all across the board, which then forces, you know, those host cities like us to play across the board too. So it's a big puzzle game sometimes.
Yeah. So if someone, you know how you said you were in college and you didn't really even realize this was a career field that you could get into. If someone were to listen to this, or maybe they're in an adjacent field and they're just interested in getting more into this side of sports and events, is there anything that you can kind of give as advice? Of like, how would you get started? How would you kind of position a career that could keep you involved and be successful in this space?
Yep. I might say, depending on what your age is, right?
Yeah.
You may, if you're in high school, consider looking at schools that have sports management programs. There's a lot out there, both locally and across the nation. But kind of almost for any age group, depending on what you want to get involved to. And just because I say you go into sports management doesn't mean that you're just going to be organizing events, right? There is the communication side of sports. There's the marketing side of sports. There's the finance side, the legal side. It's all over the board. HR, anything you can imagine in another sort of industry, it exists within sports. But one of the best ways, if you're not at the level to go into college for it, or you're not at the level to take an internship, volunteer. You know, those volunteers who stand out to us, anybody in the sports world, especially if you're talking about an event side of things, if you're a good volunteer, you're on our radar forever. And, you know, that's the way that people get more involved with an organization, because we know we can count on you. We know we can depend on you to be there, to maybe take on an extra shift, or to maybe get a little more involved and kind of be a part-time person, or, you know, could be hired on. I've seen all sorts of different things, you know, within our industry. So volunteering is a great way to get started. And groups like us and events that we host of all sorts of different sizes, they always need volunteers.
Yeah. What's it like organizing volunteers from the other side of that? Just, do you have any tips on doing that?
Ooh, it's a lot. Have a good system, have good lists, keep good notes, have a great person on staff that knows how to manage it. My coworker, she is a rock star at volunteers, and it takes a lot of time, because some of our events, like if you took the swim trials that had 600 volunteers, thousands of shifts, those large scale events, that requires the entire community to get involved. And then your smaller events, they're during the day sometimes, or they're a weekend, or they're a night, and everybody has different obligations with, family and work. So making sure that you are able to juggle the schedules of your volunteers and know their interests and know what they're really good at. And just like I said, keeping it very organized will pay off.
Yeah. I've been on that side of things, and it's challenging, but it's also really rewarding when you can give people opportunities to be involved. And if things go well, everyone is like, wow, that went so well. And if they don't go well, it's fine.
Figure out where to make it better next time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's always lessons to be learned. And it's always just constant improvement with events in general. It's never going to be perfect. And it's always just taking notes and being like, all right, well, next time this is how I'm going to do things differently.
Yep.
So what are some of the things that you're most proud of as a professional, but also just of the Omaha Sports Commission in general?
I would say that I've already mentioned, we have a very small team, and we are always trying to figure out the creativity behind what we're bringing in, what we're hosting, and kind of the persistence behind what we do. We had our inaugural cross-country event, and that was a 3-year planning process where the whole first year we were just trying to figure out where we could do cross-country, right? Property land-wise. And that took a few different groups within the community to start brainstorming on where that could be. And eventually, collectively, we landed at Mahoney State Park, and Nebraska Games and Park have been incredible to work with. And there was, another 2 years on top of that of planning and routing and what does this look like? How do we get teams here? Who's going to be here? And then finally seeing that come together, it was a real accomplishment for everybody involved. And I think that and other events like that, where we're either creating them or they happen to be a big task or had a big challenge, kind of seeing it come to fruition and be pretty successful was an awesome experience.
Yeah. How do you think about the creativity of, coming up with solutions, especially when the time horizon is so long? Just kind of how do you approach those problems? I
think you kind of know with the events that you're either on fire with an event, right, and moving so fast, or it's slow and steady. There's never seems to be an in between, and you just kind of. That eventually it'll get to where you want it if you're persistent enough. And that ultimately is kind of what happens with us. We knew, when we first started talking and not even having land, a space with land in mind, or that came easily to us, we knew we would get there at some point because we were all pretty persistent about wanting to do it. We saw the need for it here. We knew what the success could look like and the demand. So for us, it was just, everybody pulled their weight, right? And that's kind of the main thing that comes out of our organization. And the key factor is that although we're a small, mighty organization, we always are working within the community and always have a bunch of different groups helping us out to kind of get where we need to go to make our event successful, and making sure that you welcome the help with open arms and make sure that you kind of keep it moving and on task. You'll get there eventually. So it's just, there's so much to come up with, especially if you're creating an event and you're going to own and operate it. There's a lot of factors and things to solve, more so than if you were bringing an event in that already had an ownership group behind it, right? Or that has hosted it elsewhere before. So more things to think about, but the slower it goes, kind of the better, because you have longer time to plan and make sure that you don't miss anything, because sometimes these events are so inclusive of so many different factors that you don't want to miss anything.
Yeah. It sounds like that persistency, you keep bringing that up, is an important part, especially when you're that time horizon is so long. It's like, we just got to keep moving, and
Yep.
these problems will get solved one after another.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you talking with me and sharing your perspective and experience. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with?
We are, like I said, a nonprofit, and I've mentioned the volunteer things, but we would happily take people to volunteer for our events. We're always in need of some good volunteers and people who want to volunteer and love sports. I mean, it's a great opportunity. It's a great way to volunteer. So, check us out, omahasports.org. We've got a bunch of events on the calendar for 2023. Lots of opportunities, whether you want to volunteer, attend, watch online, whatever that may be. It'll vary from event to event, but check us out and come support us in some way.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Event Promoter Podcast. The Event Promoter Podcast is brought to you by Event Vesta. Check out Event Vesta at info.eventvesta.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we'd love a rating. Tell us how the show has been for you. If you leave a comment when you rate us on Apple Podcasts, we'll make sure to shout that out in one of the future episodes. If you have any questions for me as an event promoter or for one of our guests, we can bring those up on those calls. Thanks for listening, and make sure to share this with other event promoters that you think this would be helpful for. Bye.